Good evening. Good evening. The hour of 6 p.m. having arrived, I call to order this special meeting of the Municipal Services, Facilities, and Infrastructure Committee. This meeting is being broadcast live on the city YouTube channel and channel 1302. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted on the website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Now this is...
We don't hear you very well.
Louder. Louder, you say. Okay. The technical difficulty people will make it better. Okay. This is a bit of an unusual meeting. It's a special meeting called just specifically for the downtown project. The purpose of this special committee meeting is to discuss and to make recommendations to the City Council on the downtown infrastructure project. The committee will discuss each component of the project. After the committee discusses each specific component, I will open the discussion to the public for comment. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room. Identify yourself by name and address prior to speaking. I'm asking you to please limit your comments because there's lots of people, and frankly, I'd like to hear from everyone, but not repetitiously. So if you could hold it to 1 to 2 minutes, it would be great. At 3 minutes, you'll get a red card and say, thank you, you're done. Please try to refrain from repeating comments that have been made by other speakers. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. I won't recognize an individual a second time until everyone who wishes to speak has. There are comment cards available. Where are the cards now?
They're on the table and in the box at the end of the row.
Yeah. So perhaps someone can distribute those cards. So if you don't want to speak, we'll review the cards and take it into consideration. After the public comments on each specific project component have been concluded, the committee will either reach a consensus about how to proceed on that specific component, and if there's no specific consensus, we'll move on to the next item, and then continue on and go back and forth a bit. Now, there is one other issue in terms of the quorum requirements. So if there are 3 or more city councilors that are not on this committee, city councilors are not members of the committee, will not be allowed to speak or engage in the discussion. That is to avoid a quorum. 4 unless we get Mr. Roberts. But ultimately, city councilors will have an opportunity to speak at the city council meeting. Further written comments from the public will be accepted at the clerk's office until Tuesday, 1 p.m. The minute taker is participating remotely this evening. Committee members, turn on your microphones, and if the minute taker is unable to hear or if someone cannot hear, please make it known. So that's part 1. There's been enormous interest in this project, and it demonstrates to me that there is a tremendous love and commitment to the city of Keene. Regardless of how you feel on a different issue, it's great to have the interest. Everywhere I go, and our fellow councilors are going, we're hearing people express their thoughts. Now, we've had public information sessions, workshops, public forums, and council forums. I have to believe that just about everyone has heard about the project, and anyone who cares about it has either said something or is here perhaps. Councilors have very much input with which to base their positions. Again, I ask you, when you're making your comments, be brief. Try to express your thoughts or new ideas without repeating what has already been said. Now, it is almost certain we're not all going to agree on all points, but keeping the discussion moving and civil is important. We need to move forward and make decisions. Delays are costing the project more and more due to inflation. Project costs need to be minimized, and we as a city council need to be considering needs versus wants. Part of the decision-making process for the city councilors, we need to listen to our residents, which we're doing, not be swayed by a vocal minority, listen to all, and try to assimilate what is the best for the community. We need to listen to our fellow city councilors, but also realizing Once this committee has done its work and we put forth the recommended motion, ultimately it can be amended at full council. One other thing that I keep in mind, nothing is permanent. Whatever we decide here can be changed in the future. So the overall format of, as this meeting is going to go, I'm optimistic that we will run from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll open with committee comments and then open for the public and other counselor comments. I'll throw out a topic for discussion, and we'll just see how it all runs in terms of conversation as we move through a list of decisions that I've produced. And by 7:30, hopefully the committee will be ready to discuss and see what our consensus thoughts are. Questions will be formulated for the consultant to bring forth to our next meeting. And ultimately, if it all goes according to plan, May 24th, there will be another committee meeting, another MSFI committee meeting, and we will have a motion for discussion. And then that gets referred to the City Council. And optimistically, June 1st, there will be a council meeting, discussion, and vote, and we'll move this project forward. So that having been said, to my committee members, who would like to make any comment or not? Not, yes?
Well, I guess, looking at the list of project, I mean, if we're going to just start talking, probably the easier part is going to be the underground infrastructure, the most expensive part, obviously. But at this point, do we need to hear any more from staff, or does the committee feel that we've heard enough for the underground to move forward with that? But that's.
I think we could start the discussion, but if you wanted philosophical comments before we get into it. Councilor Williams.
Oh, well, I was going to go on the underground, but
Mike.
if someone else is... I was going to go on the underground, but if someone else has philosophical comments.
No, go underground.
Okay. I just want to make sure that as part of this project where we're laying, sewer pipe and water mains throughout the downtown area, that we make sure that there is a spot available to put in public bathrooms. And I would like to see that integrated into the project. I would like to know where in this plan can a public bathroom go, so that we know the major cost, aside from long-term upkeep, which is certainly a cost, but we know the major cost of putting in a public bathroom is the plumbing. So if we could take care of the plumbing as part of this project, I think that would be a major win.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to start by saying I know there's been a lot of conversation in the community about whether or not opinions have already been made or deals have already been established, and that's not the case. I'm still listening and learning with the public. We've taken all the comments that we've heard thus far into consideration. And for me personally, when I make my vote, it will be consideration of the cost of this project, knowing that as much as I want to be idealistic and fulfill everyone's wishes and grant every possible scope of this project, we're not going to be able to do it all. That is the reality. But know that your comments have been taken seriously. This is a very important project, and the decisions are not being made lightly. Thank you.
So in terms of the underground infrastructure replacement, that is how this project began. And I think the first point of definite agreement that needs to be reached is a consensus that the underground infrastructure portion of the project is essential, needs to be done. And if the committee and council feels it doesn't, then this will be a very short conversation. I, for one, I think it does need to be done. I heard in one of our last meetings, the underground infrastructure also includes streetlights, power boxes, irrigation, basically all of the utilities that are servicing downtown. Committee, would you want to add anything? Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, there's no question there's must-haves, and I will support the must-haves without question. When I asked the question on the last one, whether it was in $23 or $25, I was told $23. If construction costs go up 10%, over the 2 years from now, we're looking at about an $18 million project, plus contingencies that would happen once you start putting shovel into the ground. Also, part is the number of grants. I think the time of getting grants with all the COVID money out there is pretty much about done, because as we can see, when the federal government so far into debt and they're arguing, and so there's going to be limited grants available. And the other part of getting bonding at 1.5% to 2% is pretty much done. We could be looking at what it used to be about 15 years ago, when you were paying 6-7% on a bond. And so there's a lot of other costs. I go along with some of what the other committee members have said about the cost. And when I go and look, there's a lot of nice things to have, and it would be nice to get as many as nice things to have we can, but not at such a burdening cost to the public, the taxpayers. I had an individual this morning who basically told me, he says, hey, I live in a 1,400 square foot on a 1/4 acre lot. I have an 8-foot fence in my backyard because I don't want to see the brick walls of a church. And I pay $8,000 a year in taxes. I live in Keene, I like Keene, but it's coming to a point that I'm not going to be a Keene resident much longer if the taxes go up. And this individual has a well-paying job in the city. And so you have to look people in the straight face and say, hey, what do I need? Justify to me why we need this. And that's going to be the hard sell. I represent Ward 1, and the people in Ward 1 I've been talking to have no problem with the infrastructure underground being done, because they had Marlborough Street and a number of other places that was done, and they just think it's the fair share of, but they're trying to get me to look them straight in the face and say why certain things should be done and how it would benefit them and how it would benefit the city. So I'm totally open-minded. I haven't made up my mind on anything. I've listened to the people. I've listened to conflicting information, and I will continue to listen. And as I was taught, I'll make the best decision based on the information I have when it comes to make the decision.
Good. So furthermore, on basically the underground infrastructure committee, anything further? Public, if you have any thoughts or comments on it, it's an appropriate time to come forth. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that.
Microphone.
Yeah, okay, well, you'll hear me anyway, I'm pretty loud. It's a quick comment. My view on that is I just want
Your
to make.
name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, David Cam, 21 Red Oak Drive.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure that when you plan this and when it's going in, that there aren't exorbitant costs for the businesses themselves as we're going right to their foundation and through that foundation. We need to look for other funding that will help those businesses. Many of them may go out of business just because of those kinds of expenses. That's a very difficult problem for them, because you have to go through their foundation and pipe into their basements. So I want to make sure that's an item that's addressed, okay?
Yep. It is so noted. Thank you. Someone else want to speak about infrastructure? Yes, sir. What? Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Paul Billigan. I live on Court Street. I wrote a letter to the editor about the inflation effects that we probably are looking at directly for this budget. And I came to the same conclusion as Mr. Roberts, and I'd like to say that I agree with his numbers. With a few calculations, you can see that we're looking at a number more like 18 million. And yet, the newspaper likes to use the number 14.1 to 14.9, as was in the paper tonight. So I wonder if you could state tonight what official Keene thinks the number is at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I cannot. I don't think anyone really can plan what the consumer price index is going to be. But it is a curious thought if you think about it, that we're talking here like this project's going to start tomorrow. By the time we run through this whole process, and then the finance committee reviews the expenses, then the city manager goes out and gets money and the designs and this and that, we're years in the future. So, just an observation, yes.
Thank you. Rebecca Landry, Assistant City Manager. I wanted to just say that we cannot have an official number until we have a project scope. However, the $14 million cost estimate is based on 2023 pricing. So that is the 2023 cost estimate for the project. However, the estimates will be updated after the decisions have been made about the scope. And then, of course, construction costs at the time that the project is to begin. That fluctuates over time. So that's where we're at, and that's how those numbers came to be.
Okay. Any other comments about the infrastructure portion of the project? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Georgia Casamatis, 17 Roxbury Street. I own 17 Rocks Art Studios, and I live in Gilsum. I just wanted to talk to the point that was made about grant money and COVID funds. I don't think that was totally correct. I work for a federal grant agency, and we're still offering COVID waivers. So I just wanted to open your minds to federal grant money and the availability of COVID funds strictly. There are tons of other grants out there for federal infrastructure. So that was really important to me because
Okay, thank you.
where I work.
I'm sure the city manager is going to look everywhere for money to try to avoid it coming to the direct taxpayer. Any other thoughts or comments on the infrastructure area? Does the group have some consensus that we are going to have an infrastructure project?
But there's no question in mind we're
Okay.
having the project.
Okay, so the meeting goes on. Sorry. It could have been a short story. Next item of discussion, and I'm looking for a couple of easy ones before we get to the bigger, more controversial. Raised crosswalks. That was an issue that was brought up by the ad hoc committee and the consultant. Safety, more notice of where crosswalks are, just raised crosswalks. Court, would you have anything to say about raised crosswalks? Just to flesh it out a little bit.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Corp Blomquist, Assistant City Manager, Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director. I think in the project, as it's been discussed through from the ad hoc committee through all the processes, crosswalks have been identified as an area and a safety issue. Through the process, we've identified a number of crosswalks that can be eliminated to consolidate areas, so to, again, reduce the number of mid-block crossings. You've heard staff over the years talk about sort of the challenges mid-block crossings. We've identified a number of different treatments right now that potentially could be there, from the lighting systems that we're utilizing more, what's referred to as the RRFBs, those are the flashing types, to, again, raised facilities at different points. Right now, for example, the Railroad Street Railroad Street, Gilboa Avenue area is proposed to be a raised tabletop area, and then potentially the crosswalks north of that and south of that could also be raised structures at that particular time. So certainly, I think crosswalks and pedestrian safety has been one of the priorities through the project, and probably would intend to see those as part of any final design.
Committee comment? Yeah, Bobby.
Just to say, I love the idea of raised crosswalks. I think they provide a lot of pedestrian safety. They remind drivers that they are in a pedestrian-heavy area. The effect of being raised acts as a speed bump, slows down drivers. But also, the fact that it's raised also elevates the person walking across the street, so they're more visible to drivers, and that's also an important safety feature. So I like more raised crosswalks downtown, and I'd like to see them other places in town as well.
Yep.
I have to agree with what's been said so far. I think the raised crosswalk is a good idea. One of the arguments that we heard at a lot of the workshops was the speed downtown, and traffic does go fast. And one of the best ways to calm the traffic is just a simple addition of raised crosswalks. Whether or not they're lighted and flashing, I'm not so hyped on that, because if we have 3 or 4 crosswalks, and they just always be flashing lights. But I think having them raised, as Council Williams said, gives a better view from the motorist to see the pedestrian, from the pedestrian to see the motorist. I would like the crosswalks to stay where they are. I think it's better to have one too many than one not enough. I think the whole goal here is to slow traffic downtown. It shouldn't be a fast throughway. So, how we wind up tweaking it at the end, I'm fine with, but I do agree the crosswalks downtown should be raised.
Good. Council.
Probably the question for court to answer. I'm going to throw a serious monkey wrench into this. As you know, and some of the other people know, I suffered a really bad stroke about 8 years ago. I can't make it across the crosswalk with the flag because of my foot drop and all this stuff. But when I walk downtown, it only takes about a half an inch to really cause me a serious problem, because I can't always feel my foot and I can get caught and I can get seriously hurt. So when you're looking at some of the raised crosswalks and everything, because if I look down, I fall over, and now you have a safety and you have a disability problem, because you could develop something that would prevent me from safely coming downtown.
Don't disagree, and I think when you look at some of the designs now, and when we talk about raised crosswalks, we're not necessarily talking about just a 6-foot hump. In most cases, they're going to be probably 6 to 8 foot flat top. That's sort of the width that you're looking for now, because to deal with the mobility issues, and that's again one of the goals through the entire project has been to increase the mobility capacity in the downtown. Those are complaints we get today, that it's very difficult for somebody that has a mobility issue to get around in our downtown today. So well heard, well understood, and I think there are things now that have come of age that are going to be address some of the concerns that you rightfully bring up.
But that has to be, but to follow up. But that's a big question for people, but that hasn't been addressed. It's an important issue, and the important issue should be addressed in advance. I try to hide with my disabilities and stuff, but, when you're disabled it sucks, but we want to be able to go and we want to be safe. So it has to be highlighted that that's a major concern.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we consider this level of detail, I would just like to suggest, and maybe the Public Works Director and/or representative of Stantec can address this. A lot of things like this have pros and cons, and I think of our emergency management vehicles and those speed tables. So that is something that I would hope that before a decision is made, we'd have the opportunity to come back and get a response from our fire chief, and/or maybe Court or Stantec can weigh in on that. And also, accessibility is extremely important. So that's the kind of work we can do offline and come back and provide answers for.
Very good. Well, essentially, also as part of the procedure, at the next meeting, this will be part of your homework too.
Certainly, and I think I think this assistant city manager indicated earlier, part of the challenge here is, as we talk about, some of these are, I'm gonna call them detailed designs, meaning
Yes.
that you're, based on the situation, mix, et cetera, it would be more. Things like, I think we're talking about, I think identifying that we do need to look at these things, and I agree with the assistant city manager. I know in the past, our emergency services folks have had concerns over Main Street, because that is a main response route, but again, I think those are all solvable. But it may take, again, I'm back to, we sort of need a design, or at least a sort of, what do we want to have out there, 2 lanes, 1 lane? Then we can begin wrapping in some of these more detailed, sort of what kinds of treatments, what kinds of things to be done. But I know the whole issue of mobility has been a priority, and the whole issue of pedestrian safety has been a priority. And as you mentioned, even Councilor Filio sort of identified, there are multiple ways of sort of addressing it, and there are good things and challenging things about it. As Councilor Filio identified, if you put too many of the RRBs in one location, it can become confusing for drivers and pedestrians, particularly in low-light situations. So again, I encourage certainly identifying these things as being critical, whether we'll be able to get you specific answers, because those are more of a detailed design component. So hopefully that helps.
It does. I just brought that up as a warm-up for the main discussion that's coming. Yes.
Thank you. I was going to say, Court, I was going to ask you more questions. He ran away.
He's trying to get his steps in.
I know I'm a proponent for raised crosswalks. I think that the number of crosswalks, as much as I joke about them being very frequent, I think the number is a good number, that we have a large, long, lengthy Main Street, and I'd hate to see some of those crosswalks eliminated. I'm also usually tend to favor flashing signage. It's one of, I think you know that about me by now. But I have to agree, having too much of it in a small section of a strip might be counterproductive. But I do think that we need to focus and improve our lighting at crosswalks. The lighting system that we have now, it doesn't make the walker very visible at night or in inclement weather. I'm also concerned from a public works standpoint, and I'm sure you've thought this through, but I'd like to hear it out loud. Opponents of raised crosswalks will typically say that they can damage public works equipment. I was also thinking about how our emergency vehicles would respond and be impacted. Can you talk a little bit about that, like for our plows, for example? Because I know our pavers, the nice antique-looking pavers we have now, can be damaged by the plows. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I think part of through this whole project, part of what has always been identified is we need something that is designable, constructible, and then maintainable. In my opinion, the raised crosswalks are no more of a threat to our plow vehicles than manholes, et cetera. I think if drivers and our operators are following our procedures, it should be an issue. There is certainly, I think, a concern over material choices, and again, tonight's not the night we're going to get into it, but certainly we have, over the decades, we have tried different materials in our crosswalks in downtown. Some have been successful, some haven't, and I think that is part of, I said, once we get into a more formal final design process, those will be things we'll be talking about with the community and the council about making sure that, again, those sorts of products meet the goal. I concur that certainly having, again, different types of treatments can be important. Our current lighting system was not designed for what we're asking it to do today. That's why it is very poor. Over the decades, we have tried to do sort of little things on it to try to make it work, but that's important as we redo the lighting system in the downtown and to make it work. One of the advantages today are LEDs. LED systems are incredible for what you can do with them. Everything from directing light to colorization to even in the controls. There are communities today that control their lighting in the downtown remotely and can change the feel and theme of the downtown based on colorization for types of events you're having. Maybe people consider that extravagant, but these are the things that I think you can do today that in the long run are not any more expensive operationally than what has been traditional in the past.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, sir. These are comments primarily regarding the raised crosswalk issue.
Because I ride my bike downtown, and
Name and
sometimes I
address.
ride. Marcus McCarroll, 21 Woodfern Street. I ride my bike a lot downtown, and on West Street, and on Court Street, and the crosswalks that they have on West Street, they ought to have one at Pearl Street, but having a raised crosswalk is not very easy to negotiate if you have to drive in the road. Now, if you could let the bikes ride on downtown, on the sidewalks, then, you know, you'd be right at the level of those crosswalks. You could ride across the crosswalks, because I understand riding a bicycle across the crosswalk is not acceptable, but I'm a very polite rider. I never run anybody over. So I've been run over myself. I was run over when I was 10, so I know something about getting run over on a bicycle. And it's not it happens in Keene a lot, more than it should, and pedestrians too. So I walk, I ride, and I drive, so, and I pay taxes.
Thank you, Marcus.
Pearl Street should be your first crosswalk.
Any other thoughts, comments on raised crosswalks? Okay,
Here's somebody in the back.
where, oh,
Dory Maston. I live in Swansea, but I own property in Keene. The only comment I have to say about raised crosswalks is, if we do them, all we should keep in mind is not to only do them for certain handicapped. Let's just remember that there are also blind people. So it's not also about lights and height. It's also about noise. That's all.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on raised crosswalks? Okay, now, next item, I guess the big elephant in the room, so to speak. It's a two-part. It would be dealing with parking as well as Central Square. Discussion has been whether Central Square remains Central Square or becomes, I call it Central Park, just to differentiate. And if one option is going, that's going to affect the parking going down the middle of Main Street. So first I open to the committee for your thoughts, conversation on that.
Well, I guess I can start the elephant in the room. As far as Central Square goes, and this is a multifaceted issue too. It's just not going to be a, one size fits all here. I prefer the traffic pattern as it is without the proposed green space and without the roundabout. With that said, I think we definitely could do improvement on how traffic flows goes. These traffic lights have been out here since the 1980s. They have much better computerized traffic lights to improve the flow of traffic. So once again, we kind of head down the second issue here of lighting. But as far as we're talking the green space and the egg roundabout, I'm opposed to that, and I think we should leave it basically the way it is, but with improvement to the lighting, the street lights. Keeping it as simple as I can there.
Yep, Council Willard.
I think the situation as we currently have it, takes away a common area that's really at the center of Keene and devotes it to automobile use. And I really think, there ought to be some place that should be a little more walkable, a little more focused on walkability than that. And I think, the center of the county seat, to have that be a walkable area is really important. So I would prefer that parking be farther away from Central Square than I think several others would be. I thought the plan that was presented at the last meeting with a not necessarily a through street, but a street that could be cut off with bollards and did have some parking on that. I thought that was, a very good solution that I think gives us that extra green space that has been taken away, while also preserving adequate parking.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My initial personal perspective is that we should really be looking to do as little changes to the square as possible. Again, in my earlier statement, it comes down to cost for me. And the other aspects of want versus need. Every person that has spoken to wanting the change has done so from a personal interest perspective. It tends to be event planners. I've also heard just that we need more green space. And we have green space, and we continue to develop more and more green space throughout the city. Our master plan says a lot of things. Our master plan is vague, and it's vague intentionally. We have a lot of goals for our city, but nothing says in the master plan specifically that we need to grow our square. It's made to be interpretive and dynamic so that it can be changed and interpreted as our needs are. We've talked a lot as a city about expanding and building up Gilbo. We've inherited more green space in recent years. We have a plethora of city parks and sidewalk pocket parks. Those spaces are not utilized much now. I don't see the need, the imperative and imminent need to expand the square. I see it as a really big want. But at the end of the day, I also know a lot of people do want it in the community. So I think it might be a battle I'm not going to win. But right now, I think the logical step would be to really take a conservative approach to this project and what we're changing the landscape of our city. Thank you.
Anything at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay, opening up the discussion a bit. If any members of the public want to have anything to say on the subject? Yes, sir.
Yep. I'm going to try and get in the 2 minutes here. They cursed me with.
Well,
All right, I have a document here, and there's an online site.
again, your name?
I'm sorry, David Cam, 21 Red Oak. There's an online site called keensquare.org that has all of these arguments and designs in there. So I am not in favor of closing off the north end. I'm in favor of leaving it the way it is, and I will tell you why, as quick as I can. I want to maintain the classic England historical setting of Keene. Existing square ambience is very important to our town's environmental character, the tourism, and our historical reference. I want to maintain multi-traffic flows, and what that means is based on vehicles clearing the lights versus waiting queues by Stantec, who has looked at it and put waiting queues up. The lights, the people going through lights today easily make it with twice the time they need. The new lights will allow us to even program that more and make it all more efficient around the square. That's the providing new signals. All right, we're going to move the Main Street turnaround down to Gilbo. The people that come up to Main Street and turn around, we've done a week-long survey, all proceed south of Gilbo, some turn right on Gilbo. So if we remove that and put a larger crosswalk and area in that middle, because it's a 2-jump cross, then we can put, a lot of extra, every comforts in there if we really need to. Okay, so it's a 1-week study. It removes the left lane and blocks going north, so that left lane continues to go north now. It's not blocked by the, people aren't blocked by the turnaround. Remove center to expand the area for pedestrians. The other generic thing is to broaden all crosswalks, make independent walk signals. If no pedestrians are waiting, you, you can activate the right turn signals in 4 different places, making the traffic much more, flow much more. Now I've got a diagram of this.
Sorry, that's time.
That's it? All right, thanks.
I'm sorry. We will read your notes.
Apparently, I could have changed that.
Okay, someone else like to address the committee? Good
My
evening.
name is Autumn Delacroix, and I live on 618 Court Street in Keene. I just want to make the note that downplaying the effect event planners have on Keene is a mistake. Considering the extensive impact events have on Keene, bringing in interest and bringing in many new residents, bringing in money for all of these businesses, for all of these events, it's a lot, it adds up. And I think there's a lot of money that would be being pushed out by removing this very open central space from potential events going forward. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, someone else. You're next. I mean, after.
Okay, go ahead.
Or just-
Again, Dory Maston. As you know, I represent myself, but in this instance today, I also represent 1,300 members of Save the Square. The square is Keene. The square is historic, it's important. It's important to tourism, it's important to the economics of all downtown Keene. I think Catherine Workman had a great point. There are a lot of special interests. I appreciate the bicyclists, I appreciate the tourists, I appreciate whatever groups, the people who want the trees and the widen stuff, I appreciate all of that. But the majority consideration is that is your job. The majority of the downtown business owners and the residents are against this project. We're against the roundabout. Our opinion needs to matter to you. I understand everyone, all of the groups, the art groups, whatever it is, the event planners, they do have an opinion, and their opinion matters. And the events in the square are important. I'm a business owner. I've benefited from all of them. But if you asked me today, would you go without them? Is business that important? Will it take away from everyday business, from me, the stage, Med Spa, Creative Inc., Lucas? Yes, we'll go without. We are the economic engine to downtown Keene, and that is on our city website, first sentence. The downtown businesses have got to matter. This is where we stake our livelihood. This is how they pay their bills. This is the families, that's how their children attend these schools. I hope you take into consideration the majority.
Thank you. You did it. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello?
You could raise the mic up a bit if you.
It's good enough. I didn't mean to speak about the head of the square, but,
Name?
sorry. I didn't come here to speak about the head of the square, but just after hearing some things, I have to say,
I'm so sorry. You that close to the mic is impossible.
I was gonna say his name and address.
If you can put it in his hand and just get it back, you'll be fine.
oh, I thought he wanted me to take it out.
No.
All right.
And your name and address.
How's this? Is this, now it's not, is it working? Okay. Jim Sterling, 197 Jordan Road. I came here to talk about bike lanes, but after hearing some of the things being said about the downtown square, I have to say, I've been here for, all my life, many generations of family. When I sit at the stage, outdoors, with all of the parking and the traffic going by and the motorcycles, the last thing I'm thinking of is nostalgia. It's like, please give us something else other than all that traffic going around here. I'm also sick and tired of hearing about, I want to consider the businesses. They're very important, but they're 1/2 of 1% of this town. We have 28,000 other people who could benefit from different incarnations of that square. It's been changed over the years, and we're talking about for the next 40 or 50 years. Please, give us some vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I think the gentleman who almost made it up.
Paul Billigan, Court Street. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the mention of the green space. What we haven't heard about from anyone is that we're going to lose about 60 trees down Main Street. All of the trees have to be removed so that excavation can be done for the infrastructure. Now, the likelihood that any large trees will be replaced is pretty slim. We know that new construction usually has fairly small trees. And as tree size goes up, then the cost goes up accordingly. And that's at the end of the job when we're maybe out of money. So I think it's all the more important to protect the common and the trees on the common. And so far, in the Stantec drawings, there is a little trimming space shown on the south edge of the common. That's about 10 feet north and south. We talked about that at a workshop. It was sort of glossed over, but my concern about the small oval is that if it doesn't work, we're going to encroach on the common, and that would be bad. Thank you.
Thank you. Writing notes. Any other, thank you. Yes, Judy.
Hello, Judy Rogers, Woodbury Street in Keene. I'm also a downtown merchant. And I'm going to say that after years of doing event planning for downtown Keene and Center Stage, I think that Bobby's hybrid idea is fantastic. I think that making the Central Square area safer to use for events and pedestrians is brilliant. So not all merchants are Save the Square, just so you know.
Okay, thank you. More comments on Central Square? Gentleman in the back.
Hi, Dave Morrill. I'm on Mechanic Street in Keene. So I really just want something that works out here. We've all talked about how this design does not work. I see people driving on it wrong all the time. Traffic is backed up regularly. Just build something that works, I guess, is my request. I do like the roundabout. I think it looks nice and that it would be effective, but whatever works would be great. I don't think tinkering is going to be enough. We've tinkered with it for 100 years and we're still tinkering with it. So I think we need something more substantial than just, granted, I'm not a civil engineer, so I'll leave it to the experts, but that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger. Oh, next.
My name is Hilda DeMoya. I live on Pine Avenue in Keene. I've been coming to Keene since 1956 and moved here in 1975. And I can understand why people like modern things, and we definitely must do the infrastructure. The infrastructure really should include adequate timing on the signals that we currently have coming into the square. I'm not in favor of a roundabout. It's much too small. I'm not in favor of changing the square, particularly expanding it maybe in front of the church, but that means changing the rotary as we have it now. I hear so many comments about our rotaries, and not many of them are good, and not many of them are used properly. Let's put it that way. When I come in on West Street, I always have to stop here at the square. And you know what I do? I take a look around. And one of the other things I do is I look up Court Street because there are people coming down there. If there's a car in front of the courthouse and the light is about to turn, I wait for that car to run the red light. And half of them will. There is no green space that's safe for kids down here in this downtown area. The church has their own park, and believe me, the church gets comments about how nice to have a safe enclosed place for children to be able to run around. It's probably 100 feet square, but it's very much appreciated. I think that the Rotary has to be policed well enough that cars can't speed through it. I also think there should be, for off-peak hours, if you will, there should be demand switches in the roads so that I don't come down and have to sit at West Street and the square for a minute because there's no traffic coming anywhere. I mean, if I'm really in a hurry, I don't, but I certainly think about running that light.
Okay.
Don't change the square or the Rotary.
Okay, thank you. I would hazard a wild guess that however this turns out, you will see better traffic signals, you will see better lighting, and you're going to see better directional signage, whatever option happens. So I'm sure that that's the, what was the after discussion of details. Yes, Roger.
Roger Weinreich, 51 Railroad Street. Also run Good Fortune and own the Good Fortune block with my wife. So
Back up, back up.
back up. Is that good?
Check 1, 2.
Check 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Time. So that's okay though, right? Good. So I was a pretty strong proponent of a roundabout for Central Square, as you guys probably know, so I'm no longer a proponent of a roundabout, only because I just found out that there are other ideas we haven't even considered yet. So not to throw anything into the mix that's like, oh my gosh, what's happening now? At the last workshop, we mentioned Jeff Speck. We were trying to get Jeff to visit Keene, so the downtown group is sponsoring a visit from Jeff Speck, who's considered the world's foremost urban downtown walkability planner. And just to update you guys and the public, he's coming to Heberton Hall on Monday the 12th. He's going to do a 1-hour presentation. He's going to spend the day in Keene before and just do a layout of what he considers good walkable ideas. Some of them could be expensive and we would never do them. Some could be inexpensive, but in talking to him on the phone one day, he said, well, here's an idea you guys can use if you want to improve your walkability that won't cost you any money, and if you don't hire me, you can still do it. He said to me, do you know the intersection of Eagle Court and Emerald? And yeah, I know where that is. That's where our building is. That's where Ted Shoe and Sport is. Jeff Speck didn't even know that's where I work. And he says, all you have to do there is put in 4 stop signs. And I said, oh, well, will that work in Central Square? And he says, absolutely not. But he said, just think about it. I'm not going to tell you how those stop signs would work down there, but just start to envision what happens to your downtown if you do that. So that was one side of the coin. Then the other one is, I said to him, and from reading his books, like, what are the options for a city like ours? And he said, signalized intersection might work there, roundabout might work. He said, but there are options you haven't even seen before you yet. So we're real excited about this fella coming to town. Again, we don't have to adopt anything he does, but another opportunity to look at vision and possibility, even if it's something we do 10 years from now. I gave a couple of these books out. I'm just going to give them out to a couple of council members who maybe didn't get them.
Thank you.
And they're not autographed or anything, and I did not write them. But it's a fun read. Randy,
I got it.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, we like presents. Anyone else like to speak on basically Central Square and resultant parking issues with it? Anyone? Yes, sir. Your second swing.
Paul Billigan, Court Street. I just wanted to add one small thing that in case you haven't seen or been to White River Junction, Vermont recently, they just did an infrastructure project and changed their street lighting, planted street trees. And I don't know very much more about it, except that I saw what they did. And I would just point out that if you'd like to see a good example of LED street lighting, they have it. They have an excellent example. And LED street lighting, like we all know, is very efficient. It can cut about 2/3 of the electricity usage. So if you're in White River Junction, take a peek at that at night. It's worth it.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Peter Hartz, Brook Street. So I've lived here for 30 years, and I've lived right downtown for that time period. I used to go to work at the college and would have to travel Main Street 4 times a day. Even today, I've been around Main Street like 6 times. I cannot envision in any way, shape, or form a small rotary working at the junction of West Street, Court Street, Washington Street, Roxbury Street, and Main Street. The traffic is already too heavy. I mean, it's way too heavy for a small traffic circle. One of the other things that I observed from looking at the plans is that a small slice of Central Square needs to be taken out in front of the cannons and the statue. That's where the Christmas tree goes every year. And also, one of the other things that has to be removed is the flagpole, the memorial flagpole. And we don't hear about that, but I hope that you decline on the traffic circle plan and keep the rotary the way it is now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else want to speak on this topic? Committee, you have any closing thoughts before moving on?
Just to say, I'm kind of skeptical that this can be fixed with tinkering with the lights. I think it's a structural problem. You know, we're trying to have it be controlled both by stoplights and as a rotary at the same time, and I think we get the worst of both worlds. I think maybe we could squeeze out a little better performance on the margin with better performance and better lights, but I don't think it solves the problem.
Thank you.
My comment is, and heard my comment in the beginning, that leaving it pretty much the way it is. I mean, we're going to be getting on to traffic signals here down the road a little bit, but I do believe that modernized traffic signals, computerized traffic signals, and also, as we look later on, right turn on red coming out of West, going on to Roxbury. There's a lot of areas right now where traffic backs up needlessly. When I was coming here tonight, sitting on West Street, and watching the whole lane that could have taken a right turn with no cars coming around the common. They sat there needlessly, probably about 10 cars in line. If we had a right turn on red there, it doesn't cost anything. Right turn on red. And that would alleviate a lot of traffic sitting and idling. And we talk about clean air and emissions. Just a simple process of going to right turn on red at some of these intersections would alleviate that. So I do think that the lighting downtown on top of right turn on reds could alleviate some of the traffic problems, which, by the way, I don't even think our traffic problem's that bad. All we're going to do is drive to Boston one day and we realize how easy we have it. But I think those changes can be made without much that much cost.
Okay. Yep.
Well, just to respond to the right turn on red, I think that's actually going out of style in a lot of cities because it is considered a pedestrian hazard. So if we were to go that, I definitely want to see some very reassuring research and modeling about whether more pedestrians would get hit as a result.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item, and somehow I suspect that's why a lot of folks are here, judging by the bicycle helmets and interest in bicycles. So among our possibilities that came forth in the ad hoc committee and presentations, what to do with bicycles. They could be on the sidewalk, center median, one on each side. I thought a perimeter path missing all of Main Street should be explored in any event. Just a little thought. Also brought up regarding bicycles, and I would sort of think this will be a given, bike racks. Pretty easy. So, but those are final design details. So I just put that out. Committee, any comments on bicycles? Yes, sir.
Big fan of separated bike lanes so that bikes and cars do not have to share the same space, and that risk goes away, and then it's safer for families to ride with their children downtown. I think that's very important. And it's very important that Main Street be connected to the rest of the bike network. It's kind of it's a gap right now. I think the idea of having bike lanes at the same level of the sidewalk is just fine. One on each side, sufficient width. I think that could really be a nice safety feature, and I think it would really help support biking in Keene, which one reason that's important is, we've heard about supporting downtown businesses. Well, not only do safe bicycle routes bring customers downtown, they also provide opportunities for employees to get downtown without necessarily having to own a car. Average payment for a used car right now is now above $500 a month. Cars are really expensive for families that are looking to save so that they can buy an apartment, buy a house. If we can provide them with opportunities to maybe be a one-car family instead of a two-car family, I think that goes a long way in terms of helping people's economics. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Kat? Chris?
Think about it.
Oh, what are you thinking, Chris? You got something to say?
No, I'm still listening.
Okay, you?
I'll make a base comment, and I've commented earlier on this. I agree that we should accommodate bicyclists safely. I disagree that adding a couple of bike lanes for 2 blocks increases the safety. Especially, and I've heard some comments about, well, with electric bikes coming along, we really have to be ready. Well, that's one of my concerns. Right now, the electric bikes average about 30 miles an hour. They have great torque on them also, and this is the very basic of electric bikes. My concern is that electric bikes would use the bike lanes downtown. And we have to be careful of that because a lot of these electric bikes, and it's not just the miles per hour, it's the torque. They go pretty quick. I wouldn't want to see electric bikes on a bike lane in a closed area like downtown with maybe a child riding about 2 miles an hour. I do think we should accommodate the bikes. I think we've done a good job coming east and west on the bike trails. I think, and we can talk to Santec to see if there's any way for those 2 blocks that we can go behind the buildings. And if they want to come into downtown, we can come in east and west on the bike trails. Put bike racks there. If you put the bike racks at Gilboa Ave and at Railroad Square, literally if you're parking your bike, you're 1 block from all the businesses. So I don't think that's a deterioration at all of not inviting bicyclists downtown. I think we have plenty of bike racks in the trails coming in from the east and the west. I'm just concerned at such a congested area downtown. I think we would create more of a problem than we're resolving. Right now, people can either pedal with the traffic or walk their bikes 1 block. And as somebody who bicycles occasionally, I have no problem either looping around the buildings or coming in from the east and the west. So, and one thing I want to comment also is I hear whenever we make a comment on bicyclists, we're anti-bike. I know that this council has spent more money on bike trails, bridges, a bike park at Wheelock, in combination with volunteers and donations. I don't think it's more of a bike-friendly city council than this city council has been. It's just my opinion, those 2 blocks are not the spot for bike paths, and that's my personal opinion.
Thank you. Yes, Kat?
I thought of it. This is one of those topics I talked about earlier about we're going to have to come to a compromise. If we try to prioritize larger sidewalks, more seating on the sidewalks, more maintain parking spaces on Main Street, and add protected bike lanes and two lanes, we can't have it all on Main Street. There's just not enough room. Something has to give. In one of the listening sessions, someone brought up the idea of the perimeter bike paths. That was a new idea that had not been explored, to my knowledge, or thoroughly explored. And I think that is an excellent compromise. I also, as a motorist, I don't expect to park directly in front of a building, a business that I'm going into on Main Street either. Growing up in Boston, right in the heart of Boston, I did not have a license until I went off to college, well to college, not freshman year, into my college years. I believe in a walkable city. I believe in a bike-friendly city. I believe that we can achieve that without necessarily having protected bike lanes on a small strip of Main Street. And again, that is a feasible compromise that I think we should be looking at. Again, it might not be the argument I win, and that's fine. I just want to make sure it's safe for more cyclists, because the design we have right now is not. I've heard cyclists agree that even a protected bike lane behind traffic, behind parked cars, is not safe. So it would have to be in front. And again, if we're trying to achieve it all, we're going to fail. So I think we really need to look at the best compromises to achieve everything we want to. Thank you.
Okay, public. Judy. And then you.
Judy Rogers, Keene, New Hampshire, and I am a business owner downtown Keene. So one thing I want to say is I'm agreeing with Bobby again. I feel like we need to think about bikes as not just recreational, but this is a mode of transportation by many people, many of my customers. And we've been talking about making Keene a multimodal city for time immemorable. So I really feel strongly that protected bike lanes are an important part of this project. That's it.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Will Schaffman, 10 Belmont Avenue. I wrote you guys a letter, but I'm going to try and cruise through it. Punctuation might not matter. Okay, here we go. Dear Chair Greenwald and the MSFI committee, I encourage and implore you to consider the inclusion of bicycle lanes for Main Street and Central Square in your recommendation to the City Council for the downtown infrastructure project. Keene's roads, by and large, have historically not been...
Closer to the mic, please.
Keene's roads have historically not been a welcoming place for cyclists, but through the Complete Streets Design Guidelines, Downtown Trail Study recommendations, both adopted by City Council, and the more recent Safe Streets for All grant, it's clear that the mayor, council, and staff are all working together to help make them safer. Progress on Complete Streets is evident by the bike lanes and improved pedestrian crossings on Lower Main Street, the majority of Park Avenue, at least half of Washington Street, and planned bike lanes from Marlborough Street, as well as the utilization of shared lane markings to help connect these. My foremost concern is for safety of vulnerable populations seeking to access downtown, as is our community center and nexus of business, recreation, as well as both governmental and other community services. I'm quite passionate about safer streets for cyclists since on October 2nd, 2007, my 15-year-old brother, Ian Schaffman, was struck by a vehicle at the intersection of Route 101 Main Street while traveling to an appointment from his home in the Edgewood neighborhood to downtown Keene. He subsequently died from his wounds 3 days later in the hospital. It is my hope, when I saw council adopt these policies and design recommendations, that eventually no one else would have to pay the ultimate price, nor the families suffer for this sort of loss on our city streets. Over the years, there have been few other cyclists killed, but they are still nonetheless statistics we bear as a community. Collisions not resulting in more serious harm are more often than not unreported. Young people and others will continue to ride through downtown as it's a destination. The link and major travel way between East and West Keene, the South End, and Elm Street neighborhoods.
That's
to the
time.
north. Okay, can I just finish one here? Right
Yeah, finish the sentence.
It's my hope that our downtown will be a place for all to come and enjoy, but also a place for our most vulnerable and young people to safely travel through. This project can provide that. I know if my brother Ian were here, he would also want this too. Thank you for your consideration and my input on the matter.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak?
Autumn Delacroix from 618 Court Street. I've lived, sorry,
Again?
Autumn Delacroix, 618 Court Street.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, there's a pause. We have the comment cards, and if you'd like to fill them out and drop them off, the committee will see them. Yes.
I've lived in or just outside of Keene for 30 years. In all my years driving, I've never explored a business based on a window display. I do when I bike or walk. When you bike, you get hungry. You're using more energy, so bikers will stop in restaurants, candy stores, bars, free of guilt, aware of how many calories they're burning. They'll reward themselves for the ride. Bikers spend money. I spent $360 in downtown just last week. The cars that drive through Keene from one side to the other, they don't spend a penny. If they do, they go to one place they intended to when they left, and then they leave. All the more so when the road is torn up for the necessary fixes. Drivers will avoid Main Street. Bikers will carry the livelihood of the businesses on our backs. The perspective is that we're fair weather bikers. I biked 900 miles since I began to keep track last year, almost exactly 1 year. These aren't distant, deep journeys. They're 180 trips, most about 4 miles. That's into downtown and back. That's a ride every other day. This didn't stop in winter. Sure, I'd wait for the plows to come by, just like most of the drivers in the room, but I'd bike through the cold. And let me tell you, when you're in the cold or in the heat, and the ride is hard or wet, and the weather is bad, all the more reason for a cyclist to stop into your shop and catch a break. And small note about parking, there are 20 of us out there in about the space of 2 cars, so that helps. And all this is business interest, but it's also the city's own. The question has risen time and again what this will cost. We know it will, and there's doubt about the availability of grants, but the grants that are available are for multimodal roads. That is, roads that support protected bike lanes. They support more than one mode of travel. The truth is, the bike lanes won't cost much more, if at all more, than putting Main Street back the way it was.
That is time.
Can I finish the sentence?
Finish the sentence, sure.
But if we don't put them in, we will lose that grant money.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone else?
I'm a stickler for the time.
Again?
I said I'm a stickler for the time.
That's good. I'll be that good guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michael Frank, and I'm from Spofford. And I didn't plan to speak tonight, but I had to rise in support of what I've also already heard. But I just wanted to let you know that I come in from Spofford 3 to 4 times a week on my bicycle. And that usually starts, this year it started in February, and will go through until December. So it's not necessarily a primary mode of transportation, but it is a mode of transportation that brings me into downtown and gets me into the shops downtown and all around the city of Keene. So I would encourage you to think about what your long-term goal is. Is it to keep traffic moving on Main Street, or to have traffic slowed down on Main Street to utilize the merchants and the businesses on Main? And I thank you very much for inviting me tonight.
Thank you. Yep.
Hello, my name is Michael Olzik. I'm from Swansea. I live at 66 Mount Huggins Drive. And I'm in support of a bike and pedestrian infrastructure. I have 4 reasons. 1, it does bring economic value to Keene and the area. As stated before, bikers spend lots of money when they're out doing their trips. 2, it brings health benefits just through active living. They're more active. Because they're more active, they end up being more healthy, and therefore reduces medical costs in the region. 3, it provides an active transportation infrastructure. Therefore, people will commute on a daily basis. And I used to live in West Keene, and I did it for 20 years, starting March 1st and going to Christmas. Every year, I biked down to Markham and back using my bike. Finally, it has a positive environmental impact. More bikes mean less cars. And finally, I just want to make a comment. E-bikes do not go 30 miles per hour. They cannot by design. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
Hello, Jim Sterling, 197 Jordan Road. I agree with the person who just was discussing the electrics. I think Randy's version is sort of like a reefer madness version of bike safety. Bikers actually will go, you know, you could put a 5-mile-an-hour speed limit. We don't need to rush through. You know, they're just like cars. Most of them, you know, follow the rules of the road. Electric bikes, they're outselling regular bikes 2-to-1. They're going to be something that's going to be here regardless. They are safe. They are regulated by their voltage as far as their speed. Any regular biker can also go that speed if he wants to, but no one's going to do that down the, you know, down a regular street. If you want a sample of what it's like, we already have bike trails where we mix with pedestrians, people with strollers, electric bikes, regular bikes, joggers. To my knowledge, we haven't had any problem at all. So bike lanes, I think, are the way of the future because now it's going to be more of a destination-oriented riding rather than just purely recreational.
Thank you. Anyone else on bicycles? Yes, back there. Yep.
Hi, Jen Risley. I live on Page Street, and I work for the American Independent Business Alliance and the local crowd Monadnock. And just, you know, a lot of the information or a lot of stories have already been shared, actually backed up by research. So instead of taking them as individual stories, which are really powerful, that there are actually retail analysts looking at protected bike lanes, and when they're done right, they do bring more money to downtown businesses. They do create more healthy economies. So instead of it being a, you know, thinking about bikes as like, oh, that's really nice, it's a want, it can be a need if done right. So just want to encourage you all to look at some of the reports that are out there because it's pretty impressive. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Peter Hartz, Brook Street. The way I look at it is there seems to be two reasons for why bicycles would be downtown in the first place. One would be they'd be traveling through to go someplace else, or they would be stopping in downtown to do either shopping or to have a bite to eat. So let's address the first one. If they need to go through downtown, Main Street's probably the least safe route. If I was on a bicycle, and I'm not, but I would choose School Street or Lincoln Street or some other way. Perhaps there's a better way to design that so traffic that's going through downtown can get to where they're going safely. The other aspect would be they're going to stop and they're going to shop. Well, we want a walkable city, and we've talked about walkable cities. So my idea would be bike racks in a nodes at different points in the downtown area so that they can get off their bike, walk to where they need to go, and come back. Cars need to park, bikes could too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on bicycles? We have other topics to get on also. Oh, no, lots of hands everywhere. Sure. Ms. Lacy.
I'm Walter Lacey, Daniels Hill Road, and I speak as a dedicated bicyclist. I've got an 11-year-old bicycle in my cellar that has just almost 10,000 miles on it. My mountain bike doesn't have quite as many. I see these bike lanes downtown as bike lanes to nowhere. If you want to improve bike safety and access, improve the periphery of Keene, the conditions of the roads, and make that safer. The trail system in this city is unique and wonderful. It allows bicyclists, pedestrians to access downtown at their termination at Main Street, have a good place, secure place to lock the bikes up, and then you have a block to go do your business. I see safety issues, the conflict between pedestrians who are parked going across bike lanes to do shopping. I see problems with, I don't think Randy's really exaggerating with the speed of some of these e-bikes. They can be a problem. It's not a place for a 5-year-old to be on a bicycle. So the issue is, I don't, it's not an appropriate place for bike lanes. Use the sidewalk for other uses, as Mr. Workman said. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else shot up? Yeah.
Todd Horner, I'm the Vice Chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Pathway Advisory Committee, and I live on Pearl Street in Keene. Thank you, councilors, for taking our input tonight. A couple of thoughts as I was listening to the comments so far. The first is this idea that a couple of blocks on Main Street is a, would be a bike lane to nowhere. I think looking towards the future, we should really be thinking about Main Street as a corridor, a north-south corridor for bicycles. Yes, the current project envelope is just Upper Main Street, but that could be the start of extending connectivity all the way up and down Main Street. As it stands today, Main Street is the central hub of our rail trail network. All those trails lead to Main Street, and from Main Street, people are looking to take advantage of all the recreational opportunities outside on the periphery of our city. So that's one thought. The second thought is there's been a lot of conversation tonight about cost, and there's been mention of how grant funding often prioritizes projects that emphasize multimodalism. That is true. There's still plenty of federal funding for transportation projects through the bipartisan infrastructure law. I looked earlier today, just did a quick scan, and I was looking at the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant Program, or RAISE program, which makes awards for transportation projects ranging from $1 million to $25 million. Most of the scoring criteria for that grant program speak in some way to active transportation. A build it back the way it is today, that type of proposal will not be competitive. What will be competitive is a project that takes a bold stance on multimodal transportation in our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone else, back row.
I know you're not surprised to see me back up here. I'm not against the bike paths, any of them. As I'm here tonight, I see families here with their children, and I appreciate that. Exercise, getting fresh air, the whole bit. And it's fantastic, and I appreciate them taking the time to take their children out. I also, as being a parent myself to 4 kids and a foster mom to 26, I wouldn't want to take my kids on a bike in downtown Keene. I'm all about the bicycling, but maybe on, School Street, the side streets. I wouldn't want anyone's child to ride their bike in downtown. And if they want to ride their bike, we should promote that, 100%. We should be all about the bicycles and exercise and fresh air. And we can put more bike racks out and even fountains, fill their water bottles, but on the side streets. I don't think in our main traffic, it is where the bicycles should be. I'm about them, I support them. I also want to say to Randy's comment real quick Google search right after you spoke about the speed. The speed of an average bicycle is 14.8 miles per hour. The speed of a Class 3 electric bicycle is 28 miles per hour. So you were very close, Councilor Filio. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yeah.
Georgia Casamatis, Gilsum, New Hampshire, own a business in Keene, 17 Rocks. I am for protected bike lanes. If we want to think about the future of Keene, we need to consider climate migration. We need to consider what happened during the pandemic migration and where these people are coming from. They're coming from communities that are not like us. And it's pretty factual that if you look into the future, what's happening is people are moving inland. And we need to prepare for that, and we need to have multi-use functional streets, and we can't shut bikes out of Main Street. That's just not a question in my book. Needs are important to bikers. I think when you talk about needs, you have to consider the needs of the bikers and their value in this community. If you consider them a want, that's really just, I feel like, kind of rude. They have no other form of transportation sometimes, and I don't think they want that. I think they'd rather have a car, but that's what they have to have, is a bike. I think that we should consider all of the ways that bike lanes can be protected and use science and facts and studies to show that when people come into Keene, they spend money, and it's just a huge statement. If you really kick bikes out of Main Street, it's like, what are we trying to say about people that want to come here touring and traveling? It's really a big statement and a stick in the spoke for progress for the city and who claims they're really progressive. So, thanks.
Thank you. And someone in the back, there you are.
Sam Jackson, Court Street. I just wanted to point out that as far as like the cost is concerned on bike lanes, they tend to just, one of my big concerns is the long term. We talk about what it's going to cost this project right now, but we don't talk a lot about what the maintenance costs will be of some of these infrastructure ideas. And bike lanes just experience way less wear and tear throughout the years than automobile streets tend to, just due to the amount of weight and the amount of intense degradation, that they experience. And I think they're really good long-term investments because they don't require as much maintenance. The safer the bike lane, the more inclusive, and the more inclusive, the more people will choose to cycle instead of drive. The less car drivers on the road, the less wear and tear on the automobile roads as well, and therefore an even lower cost on the maintenance long-term. Additionally, I thought it kind of, pedestrians and bicyclists are smaller than cars, obviously. So when we're tearing up the roads to handle the infrastructure project, they're probably the ones that are going to be best able to support local businesses during that kind of tumultuous time. To me, as a cyclist, it seems rude to want to push us off to a side road. Why us and not cars? Why are cyclists not allowed in that same space? It seems kind of cherry-picked, and I'm not sure where that comes from. And then additionally, I don't know if anyone else has said this already, but I cycle for transportation 12 months out of the year. I have heard arguments against like weather and all that sort of stuff, and I do it. It's possible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Perhaps one more, because we do have one other decision point that we need to get on. Yes, back there.
We have a couple more. I am Jean Marie Bryanton, Nelson Street. And I'm here tonight to speak for all of the local parents who can't be here tonight because they're home caring for Keene's future generations. I did a real quick survey of parents that I ran into a pickup at school, as well as retired folks around my neighborhood, about what they're doing on a Monday night between 6 and 8 p.m. And a brief summary of what I found is 6 p.m. is dinner time, then straight to baths, teeth brushing, reading together, and putting the kids to bed at 7:30. Picking kids up at sports, baths, reading books, then bed. We're doing some combo of dinner, making lunches, playing soccer in the yard, watching kids play sports, starting the bedtime routine, picking up kids from dance, dinner, dog walk, making lunches, dishes, showers, winding down for bed, picking up the girls from sports, cooking dinner, family time, bedtime routine. You get the idea. The retired people in my neighborhood. We watch the national news, then a show or a movie. Dinner and reading, dinner and Netflix, dinner, watching the news followed by Jeopardy, finishing dinner and watching the ball game. And I really shouldn't be here tonight either. I made both my kids skip swimming lessons today so that we could come down here. They're up way past their bedtimes, but I'm here sharing this with you because I don't believe that the people that have been coming to speak at these meetings are a balanced representation of Keene. And I know they are definitely not a representation of the future of Keene. And many of the people in this room have lived in this community for decades, and I thank them for making this a wonderful place to live. But the time has come to pass the torch to the next generation, to create the downtown that fits our changing needs. And these needs include safe bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So I ask that you please consider the values of the families that cannot be here tonight, because they have the very important job of raising the future citizens of Keene. My daughter also has something to say.
Juno Bryanton, 30 Nelson Street. I like to ride my bike, but some of the streets in Keene are too busy and scary to ride my bike on. I think we should get bike paths in Keene.
Good job. Thank you.
Yes.
You got another speaker?
One more?
Drew Bryanton, 30 Nelson Street. I'm also the chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Pathway Advisory Committee. So I'd like to take the opportunity to remind City Council and the MSFI Committee of a couple things this evening. One is the UNH Downtowns and Trails report that you guys adopted almost exactly a year ago. This report highlights the importance of strengthening the connections between downtown and the surrounding trail system. Because of the study, the Rotary Club donated $35,000 to the City of Keene to help provide wayfinding signage for bicycles in downtown Keene. One thing this study does not mention, it does not mention that banning bicycles from downtown is the best way to foster connections between our trail system and downtown. I wonder how the Rotary Club would feel about that. I wonder what kind of statement that makes when this committee rejects the very study that it adopted. Speaking of funding, Pathways for Keene has provided $700,000 in contributions to the City of Keene to help develop our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. PFK has literally lit the way into downtown Keene on our bike paths. Currently, PFK is working hard on the Cheshire Rail Trail project over State Route 100, i.e. the Prowse Bridge project. This project will open up another major artery into downtown Keene that will see increased commuter traffic. What a shame it would be if the City of Keene turns back on all of these donations and progress. Imagine downtown Keene, of all places, becoming the missing link to a vast, popular rail trail network. We've talked multiple times about grants. Councilor Roberts, that is something, and that is one of your whys for the grants. Let's turn to utilitarian use of bicycles. Commuting. There are citizens that rely solely on bike transport, not just 6 months a year. Portland, Oregon, and Minneapolis both ranked first and third for bicycle commuting per capita. I think we know the climate in both of those cities. Let's look at some case studies. Institute of Transportation Studies, National Institute of Transportation, Portland State University, even Bloomberg, all show that the addition of bicycle infrastructure resulted in positive economic impact in cities such as Indianapolis, Memphis, Minneapolis, Seattle, and Portland, Oregon. We need to have separate grade bike lanes in our downtown Keene. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you all for your comments on bicycles and
Just want to make one clarification. I know I was challenged on my knowledge of electric speed on bikes, but a simple Google search will say on average a 750-watt electric bike can reach a top speed of around 28 to 32 miles an hour in flat terrain with no wind resistance. So for the record.
Point of order, Class 3 e-bikes are legally motorcycles.
Thank you. All set. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about Class 3 e-bikes, which aren't really what's in common use around here. People buy Class 2 e-bikes because those are the ones that are allowed on bike paths. If you have a Class 3 e-bike, you can go up to 28 miles an hour, and that's governed. You can't go faster than 28 miles an hour unless you're going downhill, which we don't have a hill down here. But a bike like mine maxes out at 20 miles an hour. I do not expect I'd be riding 20 miles an hour down there at all.
I hope so. Yes, Chris.
I just want to, when I'm listening, and just for clarification from the chair and clarification from what I hearing, I don't know anything that I've read or shows that we're going to ban bicyclists downtown. I've heard a couple of times it's like banning. What we're talking right now is about raised separate bike lanes. We're not talking anything at all about banning bikes downtown, because if we were banning bikes downtown, there's no way in the world that I'd be sitting here supporting that. I just want to make clear that we're not banning bikes downtown.
Okay, thank you. We're kind of going around in circles. Bicycle joke. Yes.
This is important.
Yes.
If we do not build suitable, safe bicycle infrastructure, then we are in effect banning bikes downtown, especially for people who really don't feel safe in the street. I've heard this idea of, oh, let's build it around the perimeter. When I talk about let's put the parking around the perimeter, people think something different. But I have not heard from people I know who ride bicycles all the time that that's something that would really work for them. People would still come downtown. Yeah, you could go north-south on School Street, but I live on the east side. I'm not going all the way over to School Street to go north-south. There's no equivalent corridor on the east side. Believe me, I've looked for it. It is very inconvenient to go north-south on the east side. And I want to, I kind of got the impression that there's a thought that, downtown is necessarily the destination. We want to have, bikes come downtown, park, and walk around downtown and shop. And it's not just about that. It's also people want to be able to go through downtown just like they're able to on cars. And, is it a need? Is it a want? Well, how come all the bicycle ideas get pushed into want and all the car ideas get pushed into need? Especially when we've got so many parking spaces out there. We've got the widest main street in the east. There's room for these lanes. We can make it happen.
Thank you. Okay, I do want to wrap up this section of the conversation. You have something different?
Just that this shouldn't be such a polarizing us against them, motorcyclists against cyclists against pedestrian issue. What I keep hearing from proponents of these bike lanes is we want protected bike lanes. And I haven't heard anyone say that they're against protected bike lanes or bikes downtown. I have heard concern about bikes on Main Street, and I think that people should really separate those two issues. Bikes on Main Street or bikes in downtown does not necessarily have to equate to bikes on Main Street. There's plenty of other streets that include downtown that are not Main Street. So let's be really impeccable with our words and our meanings behind those. Thank you.
Do you have something new to add, sir? Or we'll call you the last word on the subject.
Yeah, thank you. Mike Kowalczyk again, Swansea. I just want to make the council aware that there is a collaborative now organized to improve all the rail trails in the Monadnock region. And we've got projects going on in about 5 or 6 towns, and every town is on board to make this happen. And we're also going to be working to connect with Winchendon, Brattleboro, and Bellows Falls. Keene is the center of all of that. So all of that traffic that you're going to start seeing on these rail trails, and there is a way to connect to Winchendon, down into Mass, and into Boston, right? So there could be a lot of more tourism coming into the city because of this. So just want to make you aware that's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to have to digest a little bit. Uh, Next topic is regarding Gilboa Avenue. The ad hoc committee had a number of scenarios with Gilboa Avenue, one lane in, one lane out. I'll just put it out, and I'll be the first of the committee to speak on the subject. We have no plan for Gilboa Avenue. The maybe parking garage, maybe other project, they're all maybes. I don't want to see this major project, the Main Street project, get delayed while we're designing Gilboa Avenue. So what I am going to propose for conversation on this, that this project provide all the utility connections, the water, sewer, storm drain, gas, and so forth, to bring Gilboa and Main Street pretty much with stubs, as it's called. So when a project is designed for Gilboa, it then can go forward. But at this point, not to get involved with the one way in, one way out, or much of anything. When the time comes and the project is designed, it's not that difficult to enlarge a sidewalk or move a curb. But if we get involved in designing this now, we'll be putting this off for another 6 months. My 2 cents worth, yeah.
Agreeing 100% what you said, and also while we're doing this would include downtown also. When it's dug up, that we lay enough conduits to plan in the future for electric cars. When we go to a parking deck somewhere down the road, maybe in our lifetime, maybe not, because we've had a few of them come and go. By the time that parking deck is built, most cars by 2030 are going to be electric. We're going to need enough power going down Gilboa Ave for that. So even though at this point we'll be cutting off the project probably by the transportation center, it's imperative that we have enough conduit in the ground so we don't tear it up again in 5 or 6 years to lay down extra power lines.
Just to say, in addition to conduit, I think that should also apply to the plumbing, make sure that we can.
The bathroom.
Yeah, well, not just the public bathroom, but it would be nice if we could build some solid residential apartment blocks down there, and to have the plumbing size to accept that would be very important.
That would be very good. Yep, Chris.
I agree completely. We should not even be talking about Gilboa Avenue except for the upgrade on the underground utilities and expansion, because I was on the council before when former Senator Jay Kahn came with a presentation of how the college is basically going to come up George Street by that property and build a thing on the land that was being donated for them. And that was basically supposed to be a walkable place from Keene State College right up to the facility there. That went down off. Then we had some students, and we had a nice, great plan of basically you were going to have the parking garage and other things that were going, apartments, things like that. Those have come and gone, and there's no way in the world that we should hold this project going, the Main Street project, for the possibility of what could go in Gilboa Avenue based on the last 15, 20 years of plans that have come and gone on Gilboa Avenue.
Thank you. Anyone have any comments on Gilboa? Didn't really think so.
Well, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do have one simple comment. You mentioned the transportation center, and that's interesting because we own it, the city does, and it had public bathrooms in it, and it's now a rentable commercial space. I don't think it would be very difficult to turn it around and take control of that property and do a good job with public restrooms and maybe even a visitor center.
Oh, thank you. Anything else on Gilboa? I am going to suggest that we take a 5-minute stretch, so to speak, and then the committee will come back together and chat about consensus. So that would make us adjourned. We're back. So according to the procedure that I had outlined, we're a little beyond time on it, but this is the time when we five as a committee are going to discuss what we've heard and see if we can come to consensus on some of these decision items. And at the outset, move that closer because you can't hear. At the outset, I don't expect to have unanimity. And, please, in terms of the public, we're doing the best we can to try to build a project, reach some compromise on some issues, and we'll just see where it goes. So starting at the beginning where we were, there seemed to be real consensus regarding the underground infrastructure replacement. Committee, these are not formal votes. There will be formal voting once this is turned into a motion, perhaps at the next MSFI committee meeting. Regarding Central Square, what I heard, and you all convince me if I'm wrong, that the Central Square configuration as is the preferable decision. And opposition will be noted. So that is 4 plus Bobby. Gilboa Avenue.
Yeah, just
Okay.
like what you said.
Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah, we know what exists.
Yeah, and he was a mayor at some point, right? That basically there would be provisions for the future projects on Gilboa Avenue. Raised crosswalks seem to be agreement, yes, with noted that staff will come back with information regarding accessibility and other hazards. Didn't really get into sidewalk width, but on my notes, one of the things that what I had down was that the plan might maximize sidewalk width, equalize the east sidewalk and west sidewalk, and on my notes, consideration of removing the raised planting beds. So, thoughts?
Yeah.
And then the bicycles. Now it's time for discussion. Yeah. Somebody?
I think
Anyone?
there's a question about the sidewalks, since we didn't talk about it
Okay.
as a whole. Should we be voting on it now, or having a consensus where we didn't really talk about it?
What would you want to add?
Well, I'm just saying, the other topics we've mentioned, we went through a process, so
Okay.
should we, table it?
Fine.
I know you hate the word more time, but.
No, because also I would add that in conversation with city staff, some of this is more design as opposed to decisions. So I could pass on that, I'll listen to you with it. Conversation regarding bicycles. What are your thoughts? Yep.
I'd be interested in having city staff come back to us with some information on how bicycle lanes would help us potentially get some grants.
They're writing.
And to further on that, I'd like them to take a look at also, since we're talking about grants, if we had alternate routes for those 2 blocks looping around the building, see what the best avenues would be. So if we did apply for a grant, at least we could say and show that we are concerned about the bicyclists, but if we can do a 2-block looping around the main buildings downtown.
Okay. Kat, anything? I have a real concern about the conflict of interest between bicycles, delivery vehicles, cars, shoppers on the sidewalk, just all the chaos downtown. And that's why I'm in favor of the perimeter path concept. If you're riding a bike, you're going to ride the bike wherever you want. If you're a good bike rider, you're going down the street. And I don't think it really matters if there's a stripe on the road or where it is. If you're a family bicycle rider, you're not going to take your kids down in traffic. That's just crazy. I do see people do it. I definitely don't like the idea of bicycles on the sidewalk running into people, and I've seen that happen. And actually, we have signage up that says no bicycles on sidewalks. It doesn't stop someone who wants to ride a bicycle. So I would challenge the bicycle committee, let's work on the perimeter path. And I think that actually is a good connection between the big bike path, the pathways paths, and then making it all the way up to Apple Way, you can get there from somehow. Otherwise, the bike rider's going to ride wherever they want. So in terms of, I don't really sense there's too much of a consensus on bicycles at this time, or?
I don't think we have a consensus.
Okay.
We
All
can
right,
see some
well,
more options.
Yeah, there is the next meeting where we'll stir it a little more. Bike racks, I'm sure that's just design, detail. I can't imagine anyone has any problem with that. Dealing with the traffic signals, that becomes more of a staff technical discussion than us, but just indicating that we as, I've heard questions regarding the right turn on red. There's got to be a reason that we don't have it, because it just makes too much sense. Also, this was another comment I saw, potential of stop signs at Court Street and Washington Street. Something for the design people to look at, as well as improved pavement, lane markings, and signage. I think that's pretty much all of our big discussion items. What will come up out of staff is about maximizing parking spaces, correcting the number and location of handicap spaces, which I am told is not really all that correct as it is now. Included within the underground, the infrastructure is electric vehicle charging stations. So just to note that get thrown in there. Then also there was comments regarding events. I had some comments asking about removable bollards, something besides those concrete Jersey barriers and dump trucks that we use now. It's not only ugly, but it's also very expensive for the organizations. That's a request of staff to do some research on that. Defining the extent of the project, where exactly does it end on Court Street, Washington Street, Winter Street, Gilboa Ave, Railroad Street, and Roxbury Street? Not really too clear. I'm sure the answer exists, but I would just like to get it more firm. And one other question that came up, an accelerated work schedule. What typically is the premium for longer days and weekends? Realizing also for discussion, this is not for the motion at the next meeting, the impact not only on cost, but also on the downtown community, being the residents and the merchants, if the construction is going more aggressively. So, any other shopping list for the consultants and staff to perhaps think on, work on?
Bathrooms.
And the bathrooms. Yes, Chris.
As far as a consensus goes, I have when I say a consensus, that's something that I'm still willing to talk and debate about at our next meeting. I don't want anybody to leave feeling that because in the consensus that I've already made all the decisions that I'm going to make, because I have not made one firm decision one way or the other. And plus, this is a special meeting, and I just feel uncomfortable coming out with motions and stuff out of a special meeting that should be out of a regular meeting.
Totally agree with you.
Okay.
All I'm asking for is some guidance, because I'm going to try to put this into a proposed motion that we as a group are going to work on, the public is going to react to, and then it's going to be someone's moved, seconded, and then however it goes, perhaps with an amendment, and then it goes to council. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just reflecting on the time frame, your next MSFI committee meeting is a week from Wednesday.
Yeah.
So that's, you probably will have other things on the agenda, but also I know there is concern amongst the staff, the longer this list gets, to come back with all the information you need to reach a consensus. And if you are inclined to do so, there is a date set aside on May 30th that would give us more time to respond. There is a lot of information we already have that we can prepare for you that's already there. but some of this will require some time.
I don't think we really asked anything all that intense, and if we can't do it, we can't do it. This has surely been going on for months and months, but my philosophy, if you don't set a deadline, then this just goes forever. So hopefully, you look at this, it's 5 minutes after 8.
Yep.
Deadline. So, anything further?
See you next week.
Thank you all for coming and for sharing your wisdom on the subjects. See you next week.